I feel a few words have to be said about Queen Elizabeth. Most of the Sibur here are British subjects, subjects of Queen Elizabeth, and as Yidden who've been brought up in England, most of us, our parents were in England, we do have a debt of gratitude. We have to have a certain appreciation for what's happening. Right now, she's being buried, and Tkufa is ending, but let's just think back about the Chazdei Hashem over this Tkufa and the part that the malchus played in it. Because a malach, from Rambam says, the malach is not an individual. Lev Kol Yisrael. The malach sets the tone for the nation. That's a dynamic of the malchus, that the people will reflect the attitudes of the king, and it's an integral part of the fabric of the nation. Now, as British subjects, we know we have to have tremendous hakaras hatov for one of the biggest nisim of the 20th century, which was that England was able to withstand the German invasion, threat of a German invasion in 1941. It seemed to be a given that England was lost. They did not have the army, didn't have the defences to be able to protect against the German army, which had taken over the whole of Europe. Somehow, they managed to stand up, and the Germans never crossed the channel. They never managed to invade. However, why was that? How come that happened? And the answer is somehow the nation got together and were determined to fight the Germans. They were determined to hold out against the Germans. They saw the Germans as evil. They looked at themselves. They saw themselves as a nation of decency, a nation of humanity. That's why they looked at themselves. These were values that they actually, at the end of the day, they were looking to it was the king's value, the values of king and country, the values of the king, who as it reflected and stood for these values. It was ultimately these values came down through the Judeo-Christian tradition from the Torah. These were values, and they were, as I said, values of decency, humanity, as opposed to the German, the bestiality, the monstrous, barbaric government and hordes of Germany across the channel in Europe, and they were determined not to falter. They were determined not to make any. They knew they could have no possibility of compromise. They were going to fight, but all this was really again reflection of the values that the king stood for. Yeah, with all Churchill's impassioned speeches, but what he was doing was he was telling them to stand up for these values, and these values were embodied by the king. The other thing is, the Commonwealth were vital in the whole war effort. The Commonwealth countries, they sent masses of troops, colonials, and they all fought. But why did they fight? It wasn't their war really, but at the end of the day, they were fighting. It was the king at the time, who really united them. They wanted, that was something that it was worthwhile. Whatever he represented, they felt was worthwhile fighting for, and they joined in the fight. They were moshe nefesh, we'll say, but we have that's the way. It was on that basis that they were able to stand up. So it was Britain actually had 2 world wars that they won, again, all because of a certain, we say almost hashkafa, a certain value system that was somehow embodied in England by king and country. The other thing is, we have to think about the Balfour Declaration. Really got things rolling on the world stage, that Yidden should be able to come back to Eretz Yisrael, was really the Balfour Declaration. If only England could have or would have made a Balfour Declaration, It's, for whatever reason, it's because they saw themselves in terms of world history as being maybe more important than they were. But they felt that there was something, the return of the Jews to Israel was somehow a part of their destiny, as it were, as masters of the British Empire, which was quite a good portion of the world, and they felt that something had to be done. But again, these values, it wouldn't happen if there wasn't really royal assent to these things, it would not have happened. If the king wouldn't have wanted it, he would have stopped it. It wouldn't have happened without him. But these were the values at the time, and unfortunately later on, there was retractions, but listen, it's very hard to know. The Foreign Office have their own tajbainas, they're all Arabists. But as it were, the king himself, the king and the country, they were for this idea, and Baruch Hashem, it happened. So we really have to have Hakara Satoiv for the type of environment we were brought up in, and the strength that King George VI and trained in Elizabeth to be in the same way. She was really a hamshach, as it were, a continuation of her father, and that really it shaped the country in a way where it was congenial for us to grow up in, and as I said, it really assured the survival of the country. Someone has been aware that one of the big nisim was that George VI should not really have been king at the time of the war. It should have been Edward, and Edward is a Nazi sympathizer, and had he been on the throne, it's very possible things would have been different, and you wouldn't have had this sort of resistance and this backbone and determination to resist the Germans, and history would have been different. Oh, Baruch Hashem, when Hashem sent along this inexplicable, this American divorcee, and he abdicated from the throne, and George VI came on. But we know Yad Leiv Malachim Esarim B'Yad Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu works through the kings, through the Malachim, and that's how he brings his hashgacha. And as I said, that's the way the Rebbeinu works. But we have to have Hakara Satoiv to Shluchim, and so in particular, we've been very comfortable and benefit very much under the reign of Queen Elizabeth, and it's something we have to be ma'ira. Every Shabbos, we're all brought up every Shabbos. She have the bracha, as they mavarich the malchus, and we spell b'shalom shel malchus, and the name was every Shabbos in the sovereign lady Queen Elizabeth after Kriyas HaTorah. We blessed her. It was there every shul in England. We grew up with this, but as I said, the reason is we do have to have Hakara Satoiv, and it's worthwhile thinking about Hashgachas Hashem, which happened for the Yidden of England over the 20th century.